The glass-walled office smelled like new leather and stale coffee. My boss slid a single sheet of paper across his desk, the words, "Commission Adjustment Form," printed at the top. His voice dripped with fake authority as he leaned back in his chair. "Half your $250,000 commission will go to Leonard," he said, nodding toward the hallway where his favorite intern was probably bragging to someone about nothing. "He's the future here, Amani. You'll thank me later." I stared at the paper. The numbers swam before my eyes. Half of my commission. Half of what I'd earned through 6 brutal months of work. Half of the biggest deal in our dealership's history. Then I started laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle. It was a deep, genuine laugh that echoed across the showroom floor beyond his office walls. The kind of laugh that made him shift uncomfortably in his expensive chair. His smug expression faltered. "Amani, I'm being serious here." I kept laughing until tears formed in my eyes. Not from joy, but from the sheer absurdity of what he'd just proposed. The audacity was breathtaking. "My name is Amani Potts, and I'd been selling cars for 7 years. 7 long years of proving myself in a world where men assumed I was just there to look pretty and hand out brochures. 7 years of outselling half the guys on the floor while they got the praise and promotions." That laugh wasn't madness. It was clarity. I'd survived by being tougher than everyone else, smarter than everyone else, and working twice as hard for half the recognition. I'd learned to smile when customers asked to speak to a real salesman. I'd learned to nod when my ideas were ignored, only to be praised when a male colleague repeated them. But this was different. This wasn't just workplace politics or casual sexism. This was theft. Leonard had been at the dealership for exactly 3 months. 3 months of showing up late, leaving early, and taking credit for anything that moved. He was 22, fresh out of college, and had never closed a deal worth more than $30,000. The commission he wanted to steal from me represented more than just money. It represented validation, security, and proof that I belonged in this business. I was about to tell my boss exactly how this all started. 6 months earlier, I'd been cold calling businesses from our lead database when I stumbled across Express Logistics. They were expanding their fleet and needed 40 luxury SUVs for their executive team. 40 vehicles at $300,000 each. A $12 million sale. My hands had actually shaken as I dialed their number. Deals like this were career-defining, the kind that let you buy a house, pay off student loans, maybe take a real vacation for the first time in years. The fleet manager, Carlos Gutierrez, agreed to meet me the next day. I spent that entire evening researching his company, memorizing specifications, and preparing for what could be the biggest pitch of my life. When I walked into their corporate headquarters, I wore my best suit and carried a folder thick with financing options, trade-in values, and customization packages. Carlos was all business, no small talk, just straight questions about delivery times, warranty coverage, and bulk pricing. I had answers for everything. 2 hours later, he shook my hand and said, "I think we can work together." Those 6 words changed everything. This was my shot at financial freedom, at proving I belonged among the dealership's top sellers. I had no idea my boss was already planning to steal it from me. Leonard Cooper arrived at the dealership like he owned the place. Designer sneakers, pressed chinos, and a confidence that had nothing to do with actual ability. He called my boss Danny instead of Mr. Scott, joked about weekend golf games, and somehow managed to park in the spot closest to the entrance. From day one, my boss treated him differently. While the rest of us got lectured about dress codes and punctuality, Leonard rolled in at 10 a.m. wearing wrinkled shirts and got friendly pats on the back. When other new hires struggled with financing paperwork, Leonard got personal tutoring sessions in the boss's office. "That kid's got natural talent," Danny would announce during morning meetings. "He reminds me of myself at that age." Leonard had sold exactly 4 cars in 3 months. I'd sold 47 in the same period. But numbers didn't matter when you had the boss's ear. Leonard started offering opinions in team meetings, suggesting innovative approaches that were just basic sales techniques with fancier words. Danny nodded along like Leonard was sharing revolutionary insights. The other salespeople noticed too. During lunch breaks, we'd exchange glances when Leonard interrupted client calls to offer helpful advice, or when he name-dropped Danny in conversations with customers. I should have seen the warning signs then. I should have known that Leonard's presence wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. The first red flag came during week 2 of my express negotiations. I was on the phone with Carlos discussing delivery schedules when I noticed Leonard hovering near my desk. He pretended to organize brochures, but his ears were clearly tuned to my conversation. 20 minutes later, during our daily team meeting, Leonard casually mentioned that Express Logistics might need flexible delivery options for their fleet purchase. Danny's eyes lit up. "That's the kind of initiative I like to see," Danny said, pointing at Leonard. Always thinking ahead, always listening for opportunities. My stomach twisted. Those weren't Leonard's insights. They were details from my private client call. But Danny was already moving on to the next topic, and Leonard was basking in undeserved praise. After the meeting, I cornered Leonard by the coffee machine. "Interesting observation about Express," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He shrugged, not even trying to look guilty. "Just paying attention to what's happening around here." That afternoon, I moved my client calls to the conference room and started closing my office door during phone conversations. If Leonard wanted information about my deal, he'd have to work harder to steal it. But I underestimated how far he was willing to go and how much my boss was willing to help him. The next 4 months became a blur of 18-hour days and weekend meetings. While other salespeople went home to their families, I stayed late researching Express's industry, studying their competitors, and refining financing packages. I drove to their headquarters every Saturday morning, not because Carlos requested it, but because I wanted to show them I was different, that I cared about their business beyond just making a sale. I brought coffee for their security guards, remembered their receptionist's name, and studied the photos in their lobby to understand their company culture. Carlos began trusting me with sensitive information. He shared their budget constraints, their timeline pressures, and their concerns about switching from their current vehicle supplier. Each detail helped me craft a better proposal. My personal life disappeared. I canceled dinner plans with friends, missed my nephew's birthday party, and lived on drive-through meals and gas station coffee. My sister called me a workaholic. My parents worried I was burning out, but I could see the finish line. Every late night brought me closer to the biggest commission of my career. Every weekend meeting solidified my relationship with Carlos and his team. I was sacrificing everything for this deal, pouring my heart and soul into making it perfect. I had no idea that Leonard and Danny were watching from the shadows, preparing to claim credit for my work. Danny's obsession with Leonard grew more obvious each week. Our morning meetings became Leonard showcase sessions, where Danny would find excuses to highlight his protégé's contributions to the dealership. "Leonard here suggested we update our customer follow-up system," Danny would announce, even though Leonard's suggestion was just printing emails instead of handwriting notes. This is the kind of forward thinking we need more of. Meanwhile, my Express deal progressed through contract negotiations, financing approval, and customization details. It was the most complex sale in our dealership's history, involving multiple departments and requiring expertise that Leonard couldn't even spell. But Danny found ways to insert Leonard into my process. "I want Leonard to sit in on your client updates," he told me one morning. "Consider it part of his learning experience. He needs to see how big deals work." I wanted to refuse, but Danny's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. So Leonard started joining my calls with Carlos, contributing nothing but somehow always finding ways to mention his presence to Danny afterward. "Great meeting today," Leonard would tell Danny within earshot of other salespeople. "Really helped Amani think through some strategy issues he hadn't identified, solutions he hadn't suggested, credit he hadn't earned." But Danny ate it up, praising Leonard's collaborative approach and team-first attitude. I was starting to understand their game. Finally, after 6 months of negotiations, revisions, and relationship building, Carlos signed the contract. 40 luxury SUVs, $12 million in revenue, and the largest single sale in our dealership's 30-year history. I sat in my car outside Express's headquarters, holding the signed documents like they were made of gold. My hands were shaking, but this time from relief and excitement rather than nerves. It was done. It was mine. The commission would be $250,000. More money than I'd ever seen, enough to change my life completely. I could pay off my student loans, help my parents with their mortgage, maybe even buy my own place instead of renting that tiny apartment. But more than the money, this deal proved something important. It proved I belonged among the top salespeople in our industry. It proved that hard work and dedication could overcome office politics and favoritism. I drove back to the dealership with the windows down and music blasting, feeling lighter than I had in months. The sacrifices had been worth it. The long hours and missed weekends had paid off. When I walked through the showroom doors, I expected congratulations, maybe even a celebration. Instead, I got something very different. Danny was already planning how to steal my victory from me. Instead of the celebration I expected, Danny called an impromptu gathering in the main showroom. All the salespeople, the finance manager, even the service technicians clustered around the gleaming display cars while Danny climbed onto a chair. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing off the polished floors, "I'm proud to announce that we've just closed the biggest deal in our dealership's history. $12 million in sales, 40 luxury vehicles, and a client relationship that will last for years." I smiled and waited for my name to be called. This was my moment. "This success represents what we can achieve through teamwork and collaboration," Danny continued. "I want to especially recognize the team effort that made this possible." Team effort? I felt my smile freeze. Leonard Cooper has been instrumental in this process, providing strategic support and client relationship management that helped close this deal. The room erupted in applause. Leonard stepped forward, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. People patted his back and shook his hand while I stood there, invisible. Danny finally acknowledged me. And of course, Amani handled the paperwork and logistics. Great job, everyone. Paperwork and logistics. 6 months of my life reduced to administrative tasks, while Leonard got credit for strategy and relationship management. I clapped politely while rage burned in my chest. This wasn't just unfair. It was rewriting history. The next morning, Danny called me into his office. The same glass-walled space where I'd celebrated smaller victories over the years, back when I thought hard work would be rewarded. He slid the commission adjustment form across his desk with the casual confidence of someone who thought he held all the power. "I've been thinking about the Express deal," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Leonard's contributions were significant enough that he deserves to share in the commission. 50-50 split seems fair. 50-50. Half of my $250,000 going to someone who'd contributed nothing but eavesdropping and empty words. He's the future of this dealership, Amani. Young, energetic, full of fresh ideas. You should be mentoring him, not hoarding opportunities." That's when I started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that came from somewhere primal. The sound surprised both of us. "Is something funny?" Danny asked, his smugness wavering slightly. I couldn't stop laughing. The absurdity was overwhelming. 6 months of 18-hour days, sacrificed weekends, missed family events. Also, Leonard could waltz in at the last minute and claim half the reward. "Amani, I'm being serious here." I wiped tears from my eyes and slid the paper back across his desk. "I need to think about this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I wasn't thinking about accepting his proposal. I was thinking about war. I left Danny's office with a polite smile and a quiet, "I'll get back to you tomorrow." But in my mind, I was already 3 steps ahead of him. Instead of exploding with righteous anger or storming out dramatically, I walked calmly to my desk and opened my laptop. 7 years in sales had taught me that emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. Smart strategies beat loud protests every time. Danny expected me to either accept his theft meekly or quit in frustration. He'd probably prepared speeches about my attitude problem and Leonard's team-first approach for either scenario. What he didn't expect was silence. Compliance. The appearance of consideration. I spent my lunch break in my car, making a list of everything I'd need to prove the Express deal was mine alone. Email records, phone logs, signed documents, witness statements. Building a legal case wasn't much different from building a sales presentation. The difference was the stakes. This wasn't about convincing someone to buy a car. This was about protecting everything I'd worked for. When I returned to the office that afternoon, Leonard was holding court near the water cooler, regaling junior salespeople with stories about his client relationship with Express. I smiled and waved at him, let him think he'd already won. That just meant he wouldn't see me coming. I started with the obvious evidence. Email chains between Carlos and me, dating back 6 months. Every message clearly addressed to me alone, discussing technical details that Leonard couldn't even understand, let alone contribute to. Then I pulled phone records from our dealership system. 47 calls to Express Logistics, all from my extension, totaling over 30 hours of conversation time. Leonard's extension showed 0 calls to their number. The contract itself was even more damning. Every revision request, every pricing negotiation, every customization detail was documented in my handwriting or came from my email address. Leonard's name appeared nowhere in the official paperwork. But I needed more than just documentation. I needed witnesses. I started with our finance manager, Patricia Wong. She'd processed all the credit checks and loan applications for the Express deal, working directly with me to structure the most competitive financing package. "Patricia, I'm putting together a summary of the Express deal for the regional office," I said, approaching her desk casually. "Could you confirm who you worked with on the financing side?" She looked up from her computer, confused by the question. "You, obviously. You handled everything. The credit applications, the down payment structure, the bulk discount calculations. Why?" "Just making sure I have all the details right for the report." She frowned slightly. "Amani, you know Leonard never even spoke to me about this deal, right? Not once." "Perfect." I made a note to follow up with her officially if needed. Next, I talked to our service manager, Antonio Reeves. His department would be handling maintenance contracts for all 40 Express vehicles, and he'd work directly with me to customize their service packages. "Antonio, quick question about the Express account," I said, finding him in the service bay. "The regional office wants to know who their primary contact has been." He wiped his hands on a shop rag and gave me a puzzled look. "You, of course. You're the one who brought their fleet manager down here to tour our facilities. You set up the extended warranty packages. You worked with me on the maintenance scheduling." "And Leonard? Any interaction with him on this account?" Antonio laughed. "That kid? He asked me once what kind of oil we use. That's about it." I was building an army of truth-tellers. People who'd witnessed my work firsthand and could testify that Leonard's involvement had been non-existent. The service technicians nodded in agreement when Antonio mentioned my name. They remembered me bringing Carlos through their workspace, explaining our quality control processes and introducing him to the team that would be maintaining his vehicles. Leonard had never set foot in the service department. I thanked Antonio and made another note. My case was getting stronger by the hour. Leonard's arrogance grew daily. Success, even borrowed success, had gone straight to his head. He started arriving even later, leaving even earlier, and speaking about the Express deal like he'd single-handedly negotiated the entire contract. The key was building trust with their decision-makers. He told a group of new hires during lunch. Once I established that personal connection with their fleet manager, the rest was just details. Personal connection. Leonard had met Carlos exactly once, during a brief handshake when Danny insisted on introducing the team during one of my client meetings. He started dropping hints about promotion opportunities, suggesting to other salespeople that Danny was considering him for a management position. "This dealership needs fresh leadership," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "New approaches for a new generation of customers." The veteran salespeople rolled their eyes, but the newer hires seemed impressed. Leonard was spinning a narrative where he was the young visionary and I was just the older employee who'd helped with paperwork. Meanwhile, I continued gathering evidence and building relationships with key witnesses. Every conversation with Patricia, Antonio, and the other staff members reinforced the same truth. I had done everything, and Leonard had done nothing. But I knew Danny wouldn't care about truth if he could avoid confronting it. I needed a platform where facts mattered more than favoritism. I needed the regional review meeting. Danny called me into his office again, this time with a warning instead of a proposal. His casual confidence had been replaced by something sharper, more threatening. "Amani, you've had enough time to think about the commission split," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Leonard's contributions were significant, and this dealership rewards team players. I hope you'll make the smart choice here." "What if I don't think it's fair?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. His expression hardened. "Then maybe this dealership isn't the right fit for you anymore. We value collaboration and mentorship. Employees who can't embrace those values tend to find themselves uncomfortable here." The threat was clear: accept the theft or lose my job. 7 years of building my reputation, my client relationships, my career at this dealership, all of it would disappear if I didn't let Leonard steal my commission. "I wouldn't want to make waves," I said carefully. "Good. I knew you'd see reason." He leaned back, satisfied. "Leonard really is the future here, Amani. You're smart to get on board early." I left his office with a smile and a nod, giving him exactly the response he wanted to see. Submission. Acceptance of his power over my career. But I was thinking about the regional quarterly review meeting scheduled for next week, where big wins got highlighted and success stories were shared with executives who cared about results, not office politics. The regional dealership group's quarterly review was legendary among sales staff. Top performers from across 5 states gathered to present their biggest deals to corporate executives who had the power to make or break careers. This quarter's meeting was scheduled for next Tuesday at the Marriott downtown. Danny had been preparing his presentation for weeks, planning to highlight our dealership's record-breaking performance. More importantly, he decided that Leonard should present the express deal to the regional board. "It'll be a great experience for him," Danny announced during Monday's staff meeting. "Plus, he's got natural presentation skills and deep knowledge of the client relationship." Deep knowledge. Leonard couldn't even remember Carlos's last name without checking his notes. But I saw the opportunity Danny was handing me. A room full of executives who evaluated performance based on documentation and results. People who asked hard questions and expected detailed answers. Leonard would be standing at a podium, claiming credit for my work, in front of people who had the authority to investigate his claims. I started preparing my own presentation. Not the one Danny expected, but the one Leonard deserved. All I had to do was wait for him to dig his own grave. Then I'd hand him the shovel. I spent that entire Monday night organizing my evidence like a prosecuting attorney preparing for trial. Email chains arranged chronologically. Phone logs highlighted and cross-referenced. Contracts and documents sorted by relevance and impact. The client's written statement was my crown jewel. I'd requested it from Carlos under the pretense of needing documentation for our dealership's customer service records. He'd been happy to provide a letter confirming that I had been his sole point of contact throughout the negotiation process. Amani Potts demonstrated exceptional professionalism and expertise during our 6-month evaluation period. The letter read, "She was solely responsible for our decision to partner with your dealership, and we look forward to working exclusively with her on future fleet expansions." Solely responsible, exclusively with her. Carlos's words would carry more weight than Danny's favoritism or Leonard's fabrications. I also prepared backup evidence, testimonials from Patricia about the financing work, statements from Antonio about the service planning, even photos from my weekend meetings at Express's headquarters. By dawn on Tuesday, I had everything organized in a presentation folder that could destroy Leonard's credibility in under 10 minutes. The regional review meeting couldn't come fast enough. The hotel conference room buzzed with nervous energy. Dealership managers and top salespeople from across the region filled leather chairs around an enormous mahogany table. Corporate executives in expensive suits reviewed performance reports and sipped coffee from china cups. Danny sat near the front, beaming with pride as he prepared to showcase his dealership's success. Leonard fidgeted beside him, wearing a suit that was slightly too tight and a tie that didn't quite match. I took a seat in the back, my evidence folder resting quietly on my lap. "Ladies and gentlemen, the regional director announced. Let's begin with our standout performance of the quarter. Danny Scott's team achieved record-breaking sales with a $12 million fleet deal. Leonard Cooper will present their success story. Leonard walked to the podium with practiced confidence, his presentation slides already loaded on the screen behind him. The first slide read, Building Client Relationships, a Strategic Approach. Thank you for this opportunity, Leonard began, his voice steady. I'm excited to share how strategic relationship management led to the largest sale in our region's history. He clicked to the next slide, which showed Express's logo and basic company information. The key to this success was understanding our clients' unique needs and building trust through consistent communication. I watched the executives taking notes, nodding along with Leonard's polished delivery. He was actually a decent presenter, which made this even more satisfying, because everything he was saying was about to be proven false. Leonard was 15 minutes into his presentation when I stood up and cleared my throat. The room fell silent as every head turned toward me. Excuse me, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the conference room. I have some documentation that might be relevant to this presentation. Danny's face went pale. Leonard stopped mid-sentence, his confident expression flickering with confusion. The regional director frowned. And you are? Amani Potts. I'm the salesperson who actually negotiated the Express deal. Murmurs rippled around the table. The executives exchanged glances while Danny scrambled to his feet. Amani, this isn't appropriate, he started. I think it's very appropriate, I interrupted, walking toward the front of the room, especially since Mr. Cooper seems to be taking credit for work he didn't do. I connected my laptop to the projector and pulled up my first piece of evidence. The signed contract filled the screen, clearly showing my name as the primary salesperson and my signature on every page. This is the original agreement with Express Logistics, I announced. You'll notice that Leonard Cooper's name appears nowhere on these documents. The silence in the room was deafening. Leonard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Perhaps Mr. Cooper can explain his role in negotiations that were conducted exclusively through my phone line and email address? I clicked through my evidence methodically, each piece more damning than the last. Email chains between Carlos and me, time-stamped over 6 months of negotiations. Phone records showing dozens of calls from my extension to Express, with 0 calls from Leonard's line. Here's the client's written statement, I said, displaying Carlos's letter on the screen. He confirms that I was his sole point of contact throughout the entire process. The executives leaned forward, reading Carlos's words with growing interest. Several of them were taking notes, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding. Leonard stood frozen at the podium, sweat beginning to show through his shirt. He glanced desperately at Danny, who was frantically shuffling through papers as if looking for some magical document that would save them. The financing documentation, I continued, pulling up Patricia's records, shows that I worked directly with our finance manager to structure the loan packages. Mr. Cooper had no involvement in these discussions. The service planning, I said, clicking to Antonio's department records, was coordinated entirely through my relationship with our service manager. Again, no involvement from Mr. Cooper. Each piece of evidence landed like a physical blow. The regional executives were no longer taking notes. They were staring at Leonard and Danny with expressions of growing displeasure. Would you like to revise your presentation, Mr. Cooper? The regional director asked coldly. Leonard's confident facade crumbled completely. His face had gone from pale to red to a sickly green color that matched his tie. When he tried to speak, his voice cracked like a teenager's. Well, there was definitely collaboration involved. He stammered. Team effort, you know. Amani did the paperwork side, but I handled the strategic thinking. Strategic thinking? I interrupted, pulling up another document. Here's an email where you asked me what fleet financing means, sent 3 weeks into the negotiation process. A few executives actually laughed, not with Leonard, but at him. Danny jumped in, trying to salvage the situation. What Leonard means is that this was a collaborative effort from our entire team. Actually, I said, displaying one final document, here's an email from you, Mr. Scott, instructing Leonard to shadow Amani so it looks like you're part of this deal. Sent just 2 weeks ago. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. The regional director's expression had gone from cold to furious. You instructed an intern to falsely claim credit for another employee's work? He asked Danny. The context was. Danny fumbled for words that wouldn't incriminate him further. Leonard looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Several executives were shaking their heads in disgust. Mr. Cooper, the regional director said sharply, do you have any actual contributions to this deal you'd like to discuss? Leonard opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he whispered, no, sir. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The regional director immediately called for a 30-minute recess, during which Leonard was quietly escorted from the building. He didn't even get to collect his materials from the podium. When the meeting resumed, Danny faced a firing squad of questions from corporate executives who were clearly unimpressed with his leadership and integrity. Mr. Scott, explain to me how an intern with no sales experience was positioned to claim credit for your dealership's largest transaction, the regional director demanded. It was a misunderstanding, Danny said weakly. Leonard was eager to learn, and perhaps we got carried away with mentorship. Mentorship doesn't involve falsifying sales records, another executive interrupted. What you've described is fraud. And what about Miss Potts, the regional director asked? The actual salesperson who closed this deal? What was her reward for bringing in $12 million in revenue? Danny's silence spoke volumes. I see, the regional director said coldly. You attempted to give half her commission to someone who contributed nothing, and when she objected, you threatened her job security. The room had gone completely quiet. Every person at that table understood they were witnessing a career implosion in real time. This group cannot afford leaders who misrepresent results or mistreat top performers, the regional director concluded. Your position will be terminated immediately. Danny's face went white. 7 years of bullying me, and it all ended in 5 minutes. After Danny was escorted out, following the same path Leonard had taken an hour earlier, the regional director turned to me with an expression that had completely transformed from anger to respect. Miss Potts, on behalf of our regional leadership team, I apologize for the treatment you've received. The express deal represents exactly the kind of performance we want to recognize and reward. The other executives nodded in agreement. Several of them looked genuinely impressed by my documentation and preparation. Your full commission of $250,000 will be processed immediately, he continued, along with a performance bonus for exceeding annual sales targets. A bonus. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Additionally, one of the other executives said, several of our premium dealerships are looking for experienced sales directors. If you're interested in advancement opportunities, we'd love to discuss your future with our organization. Sales director. Management level, with real authority and better compensation than anything Danny had ever offered me. I thought about Leonard and Danny, probably cleaning out their desks while security watched. I thought about 7 years of being overlooked, underestimated, and nearly cheated out of my biggest success. Then I thought about the future I was suddenly free to choose. I'm very interested, I said, shaking hands with executives who actually valued competence over favoritism. 3 weeks later, I walked into Premier Motors, the region's flagship dealership, as their new sales director. The showroom was twice the size of my old workplace, filled with luxury vehicles that represented the kind of clientele I'd been working toward my entire career. My office had real walls instead of glass, a view of the city skyline, and a salary that reflected my actual value in the marketplace. The commission check from the express deal was already invested in a diversified portfolio that would secure my financial future. But the best part wasn't the money or the title or the corner office. It was the respect. When I suggested process improvements, people listened and took notes. When I shared sales strategies, they were implemented and credited to me. When I closed deals, my name went on the paperwork and stayed there. Carlos and Express Logistics had followed me to Premier Motors, along with 3 other corporate clients who valued consistency in their sales relationships. My new dealership was thrilled to inherit millions in recurring business. Meanwhile, My old dealership was struggling without its top performer and the clients who'd chosen to leave with me. I heard through industry contacts that they'd hired 2 junior salespeople to replace what I'd done alone. It wasn't enough. It never would be. 7 years of fighting for recognition had taught me everything I needed to know about my worth. No boss could take that knowledge away from me, and I'd never let anyone try again.